Hey everyone, so we're back and we're streaming. So today I'm going to continue, or I'm actually going to start building something. So, as I said in the previous session, I decided to take a moment and go back and kind of scope out what it is exactly that I'm building. And so what I've arrived is a complete set of features that I can start building like a full application with. And so today I'm going to start by building this little collection builder here. Let me close this. Just get a new tab. Let's start by building this little collection builder here. And so what this is going to be is a way to pretty much define the fields that we need for a collection. So we'll have all the available field types right here. And you'll be able to click and drag to put them either into this bigger left column or this smaller like side column. And of course, it's going to be like field options, settings, things like that. Here's another view of it with a pageable option enabled that has some additional fields. So I think where I want to start is, so I'm probably going to be using Vue to build the UI for this, since that's what I'm most familiar with. And I think what I'll start with is kind of scoping out what this Vue component is going to look like. So just taking some time to model like the different types of data that I'll need for it. And then maybe also model how it's going to be saved in the database. So once you kind of drag and drop all the fields that you want in there, how does that look like once it's saved? So I'm just gonna get like a little notepad open. I think I'll actually use Notion instead. I am in Notion. So we're just gonna create a new page here. I'm just gonna call it content builder. No, not content builder, collection builder. And so for this collection builder, let's see here. You know what? I need that other document that I just had open. I'll use this as like a reference. So in this collection builder, we're going to need all types of different data fields. So I'm just going to place for data, and then we'll just make like a list. So just off the bat here, we're going to need this little option here, whether it's pageable or not. Maybe it is pageable. We're going to need all the various field types. So in the Vue component, it's not really going to be a data attribute, I don't think. I think it'll be more like probably like a prop that's passed in. So make those camel case, I think. Yeah. So we got the field types. We're gonna have once we click and drag a field type into one of the columns, we're gonna have the actual fields in there. And then so each field, so this is gonna be an array, right? And then each field is gonna be an object. And each field's gonna have several properties. So we're gonna have a name for that field, And there's of course going to be the type of field that it is. So type, name, and we're going to have a few additional options for the fields. So like placeholder, default value, help text, maybe an optional icon. I'm just wondering if I should put those in there now, or if I should maybe add those after I get it set up. I'm going to go ahead and add those now. So we're going to have a field for placeholder, a field for the default value. Again, I think we should probably be using camel case. Help text. Icon, and then the icon position. So for the icon position, it's either going to be so when the fields are actually being displayed in our CRUD form. I don't know if I have an example. Probably don't. But pretty much it's like a little, kind of like this, where you have a little icon. So it's either going to be on the left side of the field or the right side of the field. So think of like if you have a price field, you're going to have it on the right side. If you have like a percentage field, you're going to have it like on the right side. No, so price field you have on the left, percentage you have on the right. So it's just an easy way to find where that icon is going to be listed. So we're going to have rules. This is also going to be an array. And rules are going to have their own attributes as well. And so when you define a rule, you have like the type of rule that it is. And I think for now, I'm just going to have that because I'll probably just have simple rules for now, like required or yeah, so here are all my rules. Required. I'm going to start with that, and then I'm going to be adding fields as I go along. So for now, we're just going to have like a type. So in that case, it would be like required in there. But eventually down the road, as we add different field types, you'll notice that some of these fields have options. So like if you're adding like required if, you have to define the field that you're looking for, the corresponding field, and then its value. So required if another field has a certain value. And so eventually we'll probably have like options, but I'm not going to add that yet for now. And so we also have this idea of visibility options. For this first version, I'm actually going to postpone that. So my goal is to kind of get like a end-to-end solution working, and then add some of these other features as I need them. Cool. So I think I have somewhere, I wrote down the kinds of fields that I'm going to be building for this first scoped down version. So probably these fields right here. So we have title text, rich text, image, items. This is for Content Builder specifically and not for the CRUD form. And then video. Video is just going to be like a file that we submit. But really, to create pages, the only fields we're going to need. So my goal is I'm going to use like a site like modernhomecrafter.com as like as an example site that I build as I get this first version out. And so if we look at it, like when we're building pages, the only real thing that we need, aside from like all the other pageable fields like breadcrumbs and browser title and things like that, it's really just a title, and then like there's the content. And so for the content, we're going to be using our content builder. And so really those are the only two fields I'm going to start off with for our collection builder. So title and the content builder, I think that's it. And so both of those fields don't have any like field specific settings besides the defaults here, because some of our fields will have that. For example, if you're thinking like, if you add like a parent field, you have to define like, well, a parent field you don't have to define anything, but like, let's say you add like a belongs to field, you have to like define what's that relational collection that it's to be associating with. But these fields are really straightforward, so I'm going to start there. I think these are enough. This is enough for us to get started with. And of course the sections. So sections are not really a field type, but it's more just a way for us to group certain fields together. It just kind of helps with organizing forms. And so you'll kind of see in this one right here where we have different pageables, or the pageable option enabled, we have these different groups of fields. So we have like the meta, SEO stuff, publish settings, page settings. Okay, and so the other thing that we're going to need is we have to know which column a field belongs in. And so really that's only for sections. So the column is going to be, we're going to start off, we're going to have a very simple, straightforward layout, just a left column, right column. So left, right. And then, so fields are going to be going inside sections. So maybe we have something like sections, which is going to be an array. And then each section, it's going to have name, it's going to have the column, and then it's going to have like the position. So you're going to be able to click and drag these to move those sections up and down. So the position will keep track of that. And then inside each section we'll have fields, and maybe this is what this thing will represent that we just scoped out. Again, yeah, I'm just building this, figuring this out on the fly. This is just raw. Haven't thought through this beforehand. So if we did something like this, so we have sections, name of the section, column, position, fields. I guess that would work. Just not really sure about like nesting all the fields inside sections, because then we have to like iterate through all the sections to find certain fields. So I've built quite a few things with Vue, but most of the things I've built with Vue were pretty simple and straightforward. Like simple little UI features that we would sprinkle into certain sections of a website. So this might be a little more complicated because of things like drag and drop and positioning. So that's something I'm going to have to figure out. Yeah, so I mean, I guess we can probably start there. Like I said, we're gonna have to pass in the field types, so we're gonna have to have some kind of definition for all those field types. And then the other thing that I wanted to think through is like the how I'm planning to store this in the database. So I imagine we're going to have a table for collections. And in this collections, we're of course going to have an ID, created at, updated at, default columns. We're going to have a name for the collection. Then we're going to have the fields. First, we're going to have the name, created at, updated at, collection ID. So a field belongs to a collection. And then we have the same issue here too, because we got to figure out how we want to save sections. So I'm trying to figure out if we want sections to be a field type, or if we kind of want it to be its own entity. And so what I'm thinking is, usually I hate conflating things together like that, because a section, it really isn't a field type. And so sometimes that can kind of complicate things. So let me go ahead and see what this looks like if we have something for sections. So ID, created at, updated at, section has a name, column and position. And so instead of a field being associated with the collection, we'll have the field being associated with the section. So in our code, it would be collection, sections, and then, let's say we have a section, sections first, and then this section would have fields. So yeah, I guess to kind of break it down, I mean, it would be so collection. So you would get the first field of the first section, but technically so it would be pretty much so collection, section, field. I'm kind of okay with that for now. Sometimes nesting things this far causes problems down the road, but I think what I'll do is I might go ahead with that, and then if we need to refactor, we can refactor that in the future. So collections also, the other property they're going to have is the, if it's a pageable, it's pageable. And then fields, of course, have a bunch of other fields, or a bunch of other properties. So we have the type of field that it is. We have name, placeholder, help text, icon position. And then we're going to have rules. So ID, created at, updated at the field that it belongs to, so the field ID, and then for now it's just going to be the type. And of course, I think we decided here the column we don't need on the field because that's going to be defined on the section, because every field goes inside a section. You can't have a field outside of a section. So we just need to define the column on the section, and then once we put fields in there, we'll know which column it's a part of. So part of the tricky things of trying to figure out some of these things ahead of time is like you don't really know the maybe the consequences of some of these decisions until you've actually tested them out in the code and you've worked with it. And so a lot of times, like, I try not to stress too much with trying to figure out the perfect plan ahead of time. I kind of try to create like a scope something out that feels right, and then usually as I'm building on or programming, I get a feel for it, and then I'm able to better decide kind of down the road. But I do like to do some kind of planning ahead of time where it's not just, I'm not just all firing from the hip, so to speak. So part of the thing too is like, sometimes it's kind of tricky because so in the database we usually use what is a snake case, whereas for JSON objects you usually use like camel case. Like imagine in your view component, like the data would be in camel case form. And so sorry, I just had to text somebody. And so sometimes I'm not really sure if I should match the data, if the data should match what's in the database, or if we just translate it once that request is made. Hey. Hold on 1 second. Sorry, I had to relocate. Yeah, so yeah, sometimes I'm not sure how to name some of those things. But yeah, I think another one of those things where it's like we kind of figure it out maybe as we go along. So I'm thinking, okay, so if we have this data and we post it to our Laravel app, on Laravel side, we're gonna have to do some validation. Yeah. Yeah. And so yeah, I guess what I'm thinking about is like we have to do the validation. We have to like validate it down like for each section, for each field, for each rule. And so that's another thing that I'm gonna have to figure out is like, do we kind of create this configuration entirely, and then we post it, then we post the whole object and save the whole thing like in one go, or do we have it kind of function over Ajax? So maybe there's like a way to temporarily save these collections in a database, and then as you're updating it, it updates in the database, but it doesn't like go live, so to speak, until you actually click save for this pageable. So of course, what's simpler is like passing all the data at once and then just saving it. Because then we don't have to create all these Ajax routes that we have to deal with, the Ajax routes and the validation and all that. But of course, being able to save it over Ajax as you build it does give us a little more flexibility, and I feel like it does provide a better user interface. I guess for now, what I'll try to do is I'll try to like build the actual view component. Like the interactions, the drag and drop. Kind of get that functionality down, and then save the whole thing, like save it as a whole, and then down the road, if it makes more sense to do like that Ajax method, maybe I'll do that in the future. And so the other thing, I'm just actually kind of just trying to look through all some of my other notes just to make sure I'm not missing anything. So the other thing that happens is when you turn on this pageable feature, we get these settings out of the box. Well, they're settings that pop up by default. So you can't, if you have pageable enabled, you can't delete these fields. Like you need these fields in order to have a pageable model, because these fields are required in order for us to show that page on the front end. So you have to enter in the page title, meta description. You have to have a URL, and then it gives you like some publish settings, so you can like put it into draft state, published, set like a publish date, things like that. And then there's like breadcrumb and layout options. So we're gonna need to be able to have these fields show regardless of what other fields are present, but some of these fields have their own options. So for example, the page title is going to have Page title, it's gonna have like a template. Well, I guess yeah. They're not, I guess they won't have to modify the names of the fields, so they're not gonna be modifying the kind of default field attributes that you have on all the other fields. But some of these fields, some of these Pageable specific fields will have their own options. So, for example, the page title, you should be able to define how like a page title comes together. And so what I mean by that is, like, usually your page title is based on like your title field, right? So whatever the title of the page is, you have that in the page title. Then the page title might have like the name of the site appended to it. And so sometimes it's nice to kind of have a way to define how do we automatically generate that string. Same thing with the URL. Usually the URL matches the title. It's like a slugified version of the title. But sometimes you want to modify how you want the URL to be displayed. So for things like a page, it's fairly straightforward because usually it's just going to be based off the title. But think of something like an event where you want maybe the name of the event in the URL, but maybe you also want the date. So I want the user to be able to configure how this URL is generated. So you just have like the different parts, and then once you go to create one of those models, you'll have a way to, it'll automatically generate that URL for you, so you don't have to like manually type it out. So those are the settings that we're going to need for Pageables. So the other thing that I just realized is we're going to also need the parent field. Not all Pageable types will need a parent, but for the purpose of this first site that we're going to be building, we're going to need to be able to define the parent field for our pages, I believe. I'm trying to see if there's any nested pages. Yeah, so we're going to have two types. We're going to have regular pages, and then we're going to have blog pages. So those are going to be two different collections. But as you see here, like the blogs, they're nested under the main blog index. And so that means that we're going to have to create a field type for the parent as well. So title, parent, content builder. And what's nice is the parent field is actually pretty simple. So for a relational field, it's a pretty simple field to add. Yeah, I think I'm okay with that so far. So the other thing that I want to figure out before we start building this component is I want to find some kind of library or figure out a way to handle draggable stuff. So like I was saying, people are going to be able to click and drag to drag these fields. So you'll be able to drag fields into any section that was user defined. Like you wouldn't be able to drag fields into a section that's like a static section that you can't change. So I wouldn't want people to be adding fields into these sections, but they should be able to add fields into these user defined sections. And so Yeah, so when you click and drag, you'll be able to put them into those sections, and then let's say you want to move one field from one section to another section, you should be able to do that as well. And the other thing too is like you should be able to delete a field, and so I think right now I actually don't have a button, but I think what we'll do is we'll just simply add a button here for the just a delete button. It'll just kind of get rid of the field. So I know I've used for the draggable stuff. You've used this View Draggable before. Seems to work fairly well, but I've only used it like in simple scenarios. Like even right here, I'm watching this demonstration. I'm wondering like he has two columns, but what happens when you get rid of all of them? Like, can you still drag something in? I guess you could. I would want it to almost like have like a little placeholder so that it shows you that you can drag something in. Because right here I know that you can, but it would be nice that when you click and drag, maybe it appears like this dotted box. So yeah, we're probably gonna need some kind of functionality like this, like a clone. So because we're gonna have like field types here, and then from these field types, like once you click and drag, we actually, we don't want that field type to like leave that original list. We want the original one in there, and then we want a clone of it. Handles are nice. I've used that one before. Transition. It's cool. Oh, you can even sort tables. Oh, you can even sort table columns. This might be useful for me when I work on my CRUD index page, because you're going to be able to manage columns that show, but it would be also nice to adjust the positioning of those columns. That's kind of cool. Third party integration with element collapse. Oh, okay, so you can click and drag these, but you can also collapse them. That's cool. Nested. Are the styles missing for this? So it seems like you can probably do what we needed to do. I just want to take a look at docs and make sure it has everything we need. And I'm also wondering what version of Vue we're going to be using. I usually set up Vue with Laravel's, what is it called? UI? Laravel UI? It looks like it's using Vue 2.6. So I actually have not worked in Vue 3. And so I don't even know, is Vue 3 still like in beta or alpha? So I guess the main documentation is still for Vue 2. So I'll probably just start with Vue 2 since I'm comfortable with that, and it looks like it's still being maintained. And I think also I'll probably have the best luck as far as plugins are concerned. So start with Vue 2, and then in the future we can migrate to V3 if we needed to. Alright, so let me go ahead and get this set up. So I think what I'll start with is maybe I'll start with installing Vue. And the easiest way that I found to do that is using Laravel UI. And I've actually I actually wrote some documentation for how to do that. So let me go ahead and find my little article. That was quick for Composer. I think I just upgraded it finally to version 2. I had version 1 and it would take forever. So PHP Artisan, now we gotta run npm install. So it's installing some npm run stuff. This fails for some reason, so you have to like run npm run dev again. Okay, actually what I realized is, so when you use Laravel's Vue UI, it installs Bootstrap. And so if you're not wanting it, I don't know if there's an option to not install it. UI command, let's see what options it has. So type, so we did view auth. We don't want auth, passing option to the preset command. So let's see here, view. Does it have any preset commands or options? Doesn't seem like it. Yeah, so instead of using Laravel view or Laravel UI, what we'll do is install view ourselves. And so in my documentation, I actually have a way to do that. So manually set in a view. So we just install view in the view template compiler. We're going to create a new directory to house all of our components. And so usually it's in the JS folder, name it components. And then just to test this out, we're going to create an example component. Save that. We have to initialize view, so we have to add this to our app.js file so that it loads in view and registers the view components. So loads in view, and then this is our example component that we're registering. And then we have to add view to our Webpack configuration. And then finally, we run npm run dev to compile everything together. And then let me just make sure that I have my JavaScript pulled in. Which doesn't look like I do, so I'm going to go ahead and add that. And then the last thing we need to do is we need to add a app ID to our kind of our root element where we want things to be mounted. And so I'm just going to do that on this main div that we have here. And so just here, I'm going to try rendering our example component. Looks like it works. Sweet. Except something is a little weird with our something's a little funky with our Alpine.js. So this dashboard layout that I'm using, it came with Alpine.js, and some of this functionality, like to toggle dark mode or open some of these menus, it's using Alpine. And so for some reason, adding my compiled JavaScript is messing with it. Okay, I see what's going on. So it looks like it looks like we may not be able to mix the two together because this kind of syntax is used both by Vue and Alpine.js. See if there's a way to use it both together. Hmm. So I guess an option I have is to maybe convert these into view elements. These are pretty simple, really, like it's really like you click and it's just changing like a property of whether the menu is open or not. We're gonna have to maybe adjust some transitions. Let's see what it looks like. Looks like it kind of fades in. Shouldn't be a problem to implement. The only thing though is with this dark mode, it's a class that's being toggled on this global app. And so I'm not sure, like, do we replace our entire app with one big view component? Which I don't particularly want to do. Unless I really need to. Because I know the other option is, there's another framework, what is it called? It's not Alpine.js, it's a view framework for Laravel that lets you easily like render single page app applications from Laravel itself. I don't think it's Livewire. I believe it's by what's his name? Inertia.js. This is what I'm looking at. So Inertia.js lets you generate the data you need, and then it renders a view component with that data straight from your controller. So Inertia is a new approach to building classic server-side driven apps. Inertia allows you to create fully client-side rendered single-page apps without much of the complexity that comes with modern-day single-page applications. It does this by leveraging existing server-side frameworks. Inertia has no client-side routing, nor does it require an API. Simply build controllers and page views like you've always done. So Inertia isn't a framework, nor is it a replacement for your existing server-side or client-side frameworks. Rather, it's designed to work with them. Think of Inertia as glue that connects the two. Inertia does this via adapters. We currently have 3 official client-side adapters, React, Vue, and Svelte, and 2 server-side adapters, Laravel and Rails. So we're interested in Vue, of course. This is super fast. This loads really fast. Is it making a request on every page load? It is. Response time is like 78 seconds, but I guess what's nice is it doesn't have to do a full page refresh. It just it looks like it just brings in the data. Just kind of what I'm interested in is like, this is probably its own component, but then like, how about this part right here? Like, how does that integrate with the rest of the app? So I wonder, it looks like we can find the source code here. I just want to take a peek real quick, just to see how that's set up. Okay, so it looks like this whole app is generated through inertia. This is where the main app is generated. So what does the page look like? So what page were we on? Organizations. So let's look at the index. So we have an H1 tag. It's that. So I guess it starts, this is the component right here. So how does it bring in all the other stuff? Layout. So it looks like there's a layout somewhere. So at shared/layout. I want to find this notification. This user. My profile, where's that at? Here it is. So how does this drop down function? So it's using a drop down component, it looks like. Fair enough. Okay, yeah, so it looks like we'll have like for these, it'll be like a drop down component. So we'll have like the content of the drop down, and then when you click, it toggles the, I guess, like the state of the drop down, whether it's visible or not. I guess the other thing too is like the app in general is going to have to know if one drop down is open, it should close the other. As far as these header ones are concerned, like I think if there's another drop down in the page, it shouldn't be concerned about that. But when you click one of these, like if this one's open and you click this one, it has to close that one before it opens this one. For the dark mode, we can just have a property for it. So in our app, in our global app, we'll have, or in our layout, I guess, would it be probably in the layout? We would have some data for managing the state of the dark mode. So the other thing too that I'm wondering is like, if we use inertia.js, are we gonna have to use inertia.js for everything, or can we use it when we need it? So maybe some controllers just return a regular view, like a Laravel view, blade view, but then other controllers they return a full, or other controllers they return like a view component using inertia. So I'm gonna have to do some reading. I think what I'll do is I'll do some more research into inertia, maybe play around with it, kind of figure out which direction I want to take it, and then I can come back and put it together.